Hello, everybody. You're about to take this cultural sensitivity quiz, and what I'm going to do right now, and you can follow along with me, is read these two articles to you uh, before you take the quiz. In fact, Mr. Wenrich is probably going to be playing this video like right at the beginning of class. Either way, so the point of this week has been to learn about just like a general introduction to culture. And it's a broad topic. It can be anything that human beings do. The geography book underneath your desk has got a great definition, but hey, I'm your teacher. It's a broad thing. Um, we talked about the different ways that we can change our culture when it comes to addressing climate change on Monday. Um, and a great article. On Tuesday, I had you think about who you are and create your own cultural top 10, like 10 things that define who you are. And more importantly, how those things utilize natural resources and how it got to be important to you. And the last couple of days, you've been doing like a little cultural snapshot, the little cultural profile of 5 different countries from your Atlas project. And that's like the positive side of culture. This is the bad side because culture is anything that human beings do, right? Well, some of the things that human beings do isn't necessarily nice or fair. And that is one of the topics of today's assignment. Well, it is the topic of today's assignment, where you have to read these two articles and answer some questions on the quiz in Canvas. So with that being said, we're going to start off with this one first. And it is a first person narrative about somebody's experience in the past year. And I will just let the article speak for itself. After believing I was unseen for most of my life, I'm in an unwanted spotlight by Christina Lee. My fondness for the sport was growing. Even though I was just a substitute in our gym class soccer game, I cheered excitedly, watching my teammates trying to score a goal. My voice was hoarse, but I felt like part of the bigger group, a unified community. And then, bam, suddenly I didn't. Pain was shooting up the side of my left leg. Wincing, I looked down and saw a ball rolling at my feet. Oh, sorry, can I have that back? I heard a girl's voice say. When I turned toward the voice, I noticed a few kids peering through the gap of the gym wall that separates the junior and the freshman physical education classes. As soon as she made eye contact with me, she ducked behind her group of friends. One of the boys looked at my face and grinned. Then he shouted, "Corona!" The group burst into loud laughter. The girl cruelly smirked, and then they were gone before I could comprehend what had happened. I stood there, dazed, wondering if they had thrown the ball on purpose. A classmate picked up the ball at my feet, threw it into the freshman side of the gym, then ran back into play. The game continued. Feeling seen, but not in a good way. I stood there under the white lights of the gym as my leg throbbed and my class continued to talk, continued to compete and run. My friend, who was standing next to me, tried to engage in small talk, but none of her words registered. It was as if I were underwater. Everything sounded muddled and inaudible. I nodded in response, despite not knowing what I was nodding to. An uneasy feeling made its way through me. In early March 2020, people at school started talking about COVID-19. Despite the rise in fear and anxiety, public schools had remained open and I still attended my classes. On my train ride to school just 2 hours before, I'd watched videos on my phone of assaults on Asian Americans. They showed up all over my Instagram feed with language like, Asian people deserve this, and who told Chinese people to go around eating bats? Now there's a virus going around and it's all their fault. I put my phone away, wanting a break from the racism. Then I noticed the man sitting next to me shifting uncomfortably in his seat. When I looked at him, he quickly got up and walked to the other end of the car. My senses were heightened as I got off the train and walked to transfer to the L. I noticed that although the station was crowded, people weren't bumping into me. Then I realized some were actively making sure not to touch me. It was as if I was an outsider that society was othering, or even worse, like I was the virus itself. I felt scared and ashamed that I was being associated with a virus. Unsettling thoughts about my safety began to creep in. I began to wonder if I would be the next person to be spat on or attacked for walking down the street just because I'm an Asian. Throughout my life, I actively sought to find characters like me, but I never saw much of myself in the media, news, or books. It felt as if my race didn't exist. Now, for the first time in my life, I felt seen. As a Chinese American, I felt like I never received much attention living in the United States. In discussions about race, in school, online, and among friends, I felt like others viewed me as nearer to whiteness than other minority groups, thus dismissing my own struggles with my identity. This was puzzling because my pursuit for social change stems from my racial identity, understanding how it feels to be marginalized. Still, like many Asian Americans, I didn't feel like I could speak up and add my experiences in a conversation about race. No tolerance. During science class, my teacher sternly informed us that the pandemic isn't connected to any race, ethnicity, or nationality, combating my doubts and fears. She told us to wash our hands and cover our mouths when we cough, and then explained the new bathroom procedures implemented by the school, such as refilling the soap every 2 hours. There will be no harassment, physical or verbal or otherwise of any kind, she said strictly. There is absolutely no tolerance for that. Her firmness and her unwavering gaze at the class made me feel safe. In a school that prides itself on diversity and inclusion, I've always been proud to attend Brooklyn Latin. It has a strong, supportive community. During this time, I didn't feel as if I had to navigate this school community the same way I had to with the outside world, where so much painfully reminded me of my racial identity and the history of oppression that comes along with it. I didn't have to worry about my classmates perceiving me as dirty or believing that I ate dogs or assuming that I can't speak English correctly. My school made me feel as if thinking about my race doesn't always have to be so painful and confusing. I see myself everywhere. Yet, I was standing under the gym's blindingly white lights with a bruise on my leg and scars to my psyche after being verbally targeted for my race. I couldn't hear my friends' words, and the freshmen that had laughed at me were on the other side of the wall I was leaning on. I felt like all of the lights in the gym were shining on me. I had a strong urge to close my eyes. I felt blinded by the light. I thought, how easily the model minority myth can be flipped to the yellow peril. How easily feeling safe at school can be flipped to feeling unsafe. I felt lonely, even in my diverse high school, where my science teacher tells us through her unrelenting tone, so sure and so confident that harassment will not be allowed, it is not a safe space. The lights are far too bright. The first time in my life, I see myself everywhere. I also feel fear for my family, my friends, and my safety. On the news, and the hate crime videos, among the cruel comments, between the tweets of language such as the Chinese virus from our president, and the shout of Corona, and the laughter of students from my school. I feel like I only exist when people want to use my racial group to pit us against other minorities or to blame for a pandemic. Those are the only two times I realize I have ever really felt seen as a Chinese American. Waves of sadness and loneliness like I've never known before crashed into me. It threatened to suffocate me. I felt like my heart might break. Hey, Christina, my team captain explained, sweaty and tired. You're in. It's a new game. You're a defender. So that's one. Next, we have an article from Newsella. The article that you're getting a copy of won't have this, but as you probably already know, the topic is quite sensitive. So be mindful of that. Just a typical article that you would read on Newsella. There you go. What it's like to be Asian during the coronavirus pandemic. This was written about a year ago, 4/14/2020. Carl Chan was out shopping in San Francisco, California, when he covered his mouth to cough a little. A couple standing about 20 to 30 feet away from him stared in alarm, and then the woman turned and ran away. Another time, he was walking down an Oakland, California street with a group of people when somebody started coughing. It wasn't Chan, but people turned around, glared at him, and covered their mouths. The dirty looks happened in early March, before California Governor Gavin Newsom ordered the state's 40 million residents to stay at home. It was before President Donald Trump called the deadly COVID-19 as the Chinese virus. COVID-19 is short for coronavirus 2019. This was before the coronavirus pandemic sent the country's economy into a tailspin. This was also before it killed thousands of Americans and infected thousands more. They look at me and think I'm some kind of virus, said Chan, president of the Oakland Chinatown Chamber of Commerce. During the pandemic, Asian Americans across the United States have become the target of xenophobic and prejudiced attacks. Experts said the scapegoating is fueled by harmful speech from politicians. The experts included President Trump, who later called for the protection of Asian Americans from xenophobic attacks. On March 23rd, Trump called Asian Americans amazing people and said the epidemic is not their fault in any way, shape, or form. People from all Asian backgrounds have been mistreated. Russell Jung leads the Asian American Studies Department at San Francisco State University in California. He's been studying harmful incidents against Asian Americans during the coronavirus pandemic. Jung said that in recent months, people from all Asian backgrounds, not just Chinese Americans, have been mistreated. They have been shunned, verbally abused, name-called, coughed, and spat on, and even physically assaulted, he said. Wearing face masks is a practice that began in Asian countries for cultural and environmental reasons. It has crossed over to immigrant communities in the United States. now it has become a radicalized symbol of the virus. Zhang said that Asian Americans wearing masks are seen as disease carriers. If they are not wearing masks, then they are seen as disease carriers who are acting careless, he said. Alicia McCauley is the spokeswoman for the Commission on Human Rights. It is a group that investigates incidents of harassment and discrimination in New York City. The commission has received a sharp increase in calls about COVID-19 related discrimination against Asian Americans, McCauley said. Steve Milet is the police chief in Bellevue, Washington. He said he's seen a 178% increase in the number of applications for firearm transfers. The state requires firearm dealerships to report all firearm transfers to local police. Milet said a significant number of applicants appeared to have last names that indicate they have Chinese heritage. Milet said that harassment and unfair treatment might have made the applicants fearful. They felt like they needed to arm themselves to protect themselves and their family, he said. Police say people are not reporting more hate crimes. There is an abundance of anecdotal evidence of harassment reported in the media and by groups that fight against discrimination. However, many police departments, including Milet, said they have not seen a significant rise in the number of hate crime reports related to COVID-19. This suggests that people might have doubts or fears about reporting these incidents to the police. That's a concern for Milet. He said that hate crimes normally start as verbal attacks that don't rise to the level of a crime before they escalate into physical violence. It is important for law enforcement to get involved early before the situation becomes more dangerous, he said. Zhang, the San Francisco State professor, said there are several reasons why people might not want to report to police. Many Asian Americans are cautious about dealing with the government, he said. Some fled authoritarian governments from their home countries and are naturally distrustful of authority. Authoritarianism is a form of government characterized by strong central power and limited political freedoms. Some people who are being targeted came to the United States illegally and are fearful of calling attention to themselves. Speaking different languages can also be an issue. Website gets 673 reports of discrimination in 1 week. Zhang recently teamed up with 2 groups in California that fight discrimination. They launched a website allowing people to report incidents without having to give their names. They received 673 responses in 1 week from across the country. The incidents involved not only Chinese Americans, but also Japanese, Koreans, Taiwanese, Vietnamese, and Filipinos. This highlights that Asian Americans from many backgrounds are facing unfair treatment, Zhang said. Some reported being coughed at and spat on. Some said they were barred from business establishments, yelled at by cashiers and customers who accused them of bringing the virus to the country. Some said Lyft and Uber drivers refused to give them rides. In Oakland's Chinatown, the scapegoating has led to a slump in business, said Chan. Family establishments, many of which were started years ago by elderly residents who came to the United States for a better future for their families, began seeing significant drops in their business. Before California's shelter-in-place order took effect, many small business owners turned to their personal savings to keep their businesses open and make sure their employees still had jobs, Chan said. Personally, I feel very sad. When I'm quietly sitting down, I just feel so sad, Chan said, his voice breaking. Many of us are really suffering. And that's the second article. All right, so answer the questions in the best way that you possibly can. And remember, when you're learning about different cultures, be cognizant that the words coming out of your mouth could impact others. So be kind, be culturally sensitive, have respect for somebody who doesn't look like you. And more importantly, peace and love, my people. All right, good luck on this quiz. And yeah, see you.